The one that you posted, the Japanese blogger, the man.
Is that the Fukushima diary or the other one?
No, not the Fukushima diary.
Oh yeah, the one with the
man.
green.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right, now, what we're going to talk about is some steps that have been made towards the destruction of the entire earth, which is what?
In this our show number 14.
In our show number 14. Now, to get a full grasp of this, we've got a PowerPoint running, and we've also got a whiteboard. So I'm going to talk to the audience as best I can to make it clear what I'm actually got in the PowerPoint and the drawing on the whiteboard. But it is all leading up to how we can cure this problem in Fukushima, what it's all about. And so, what do you got to say on that, my dear?
Oh, yeah, I was just talking with Joel about the site that he's got the link to through Facebook. A man who is 70 years of age now. I'll just read this a little and then set up. Do you want to get around in position to your whiteboard while I read this?
No, I'm ready.
Okay, all right.
The camera's already set up.
Okay, the writer of this blog, myself, is a Japanese man with a very professional experience who will turn 70 in a few years. I have worked in a large organisation in Japan, have also worked abroad, have gone through redundancy and worked in a part-time job at close to the minimum age.
Wage. Carry on.
Yeah, wage. Sorry. Now that I don't work anymore and that I am in a fortunate enough situation where I don't have to shiver from cold or starve, I thought I would use my spare time and experience for something useful for society and started a blog in 2005. It has been a while since Japanese society stopped caring for the socially weak. The nuclear crisis at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant has marked the final confirmation of this. We have been deprived of our humble pleasure of eating. Staying healthy has become a struggle. In other words, our right to health or even the right to life are being threatened by the government and by some major firms. This angers me, and my days are spent trying to fight against this situation so as to help this country go in a better direction. It would be a great pleasure if I could share my concerns with you, and that in doing so I were able to help this world, even if it is only in a small way. Thank you for reading. Then he has all of his categories, different subjects, things you should know about Fukushima. These are the titles. The gods of death are lining up. Air dose rate at Tokyo measured by citizens. And then the field work 1, 2, 3, 4, construction workers face. So under each heading, let's go over to the gods of death are lining up. These have all been written throughout May this year. He says the gods of death are lining up just around the corner over there. If you want to thank your family for what they have done for you, it might be time to consider writing them a letter now. It seems clear to me now that the health problems caused by the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident will be more terrible than anyone has ever imagined. The reasons are as follows. This was dated the 20th of May, and it was that date that the video of the fire that was happening, reactor 4. Number 1, the radiation contamination caused by the Fukushima nuclear accident has reached a densely populated area. 2, in the Fukushima accident, more alpha and beta emitting radioisotopes are said to have been released than in Chernobyl. 3, in Japan, residents have been made to remain in contaminated areas, whereas in Chernobyl, residents of areas with the same degree of contamination were moved away. Number 4, restrictions on the distribution of food are not as strict as the measures that were taken at the time of the Chernobyl accident. 5, people are not told about how to avoid radiation. 6. In Japan, serious irradiation through inhalation happened over a vast area at the early stage of the accident. 7. Health problems are appearing earlier than in Chernobyl. 8. Tsunami debris, general waste and cars that are contaminated by radiation have been transported and spread all over Japan. 9. In Chernobyl, they managed to encase the reactor in its sarcophagus in 7 months, whereas in Japan, 3 years after the accident, radioactive matter is still being emitted continuously from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant.
Okay, so that's the point, sarcophagus. We'll leave it there. I want to get into showing the people briefly how to fix it. We'll do that first. We'll look on the screen over here, and I'll draw it up, and then we'll talk about the this here. Get that out of the way for a second. So it's quite an easy fix. See if I'm on the screen all right.
It's no use asking me to help line you up, is there, babe?
What, darling?
I could stand on a chair and have a look.
Come around and do it. I'll just do a rough drawing here. What you've got is 650 metres by about 300 metres of the 4 plants, that something like this. So, take it down a bit. Now, along here is the retaining wall, which was supposed to have stopped the tsunami, because they knew the tsunami was coming in. That's why they built the damn thing, right? So, what you've got to do is dump all over these here iron ore, right? And it's got to be mixed with thermite. Now, thermite is what brought down the Twin Towers. It when you mix it with iron ore in the rough state, the heat that's generated will melt it. It's about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit or more, and it will melt it. So what you've got to do is fill all this up, and then with slag that you got from Japan already in the ironworks, the smelters, you mix that in as well, and there's other chemicals which I'll show you in another upload how to do it properly. But that's basically what we're saying. Now, I went and seen a man called Clive Palmer. After he said he would assist us in getting to Rome to help out the Pope. Now, this man's a Catholic. He's the richest man in the world, and he receives 500 million per year from China from the coal and the iron ore that he had set up. Right? He's going to receive that amount of money for the next 30 years. So it makes him a very wealthy man. So helping me and Martha get to Rome would be about 1/10 of a 100th of a second of his worth that he earns daily. We wanted to hire Pilkingtons or some large detective agency to go in there and find out what the hell's going on. Because now we know, of course, he's part of it. But the point is, he's a Catholic. Now what he's done, he's run for Parliament, and he owns this gigantic resort. And where's his photograph of Parliament? There he is there. How's that done on the camera?
Yes.
He made his money by being a cohort of a man called Joe Peterson in Queensland, who was into all sorts of rorts. And he made $40 million in dealing with having land changed over from one category to another and then selling it. Right? So he was very, very well connected with Joe Peterson, who was a man that should have been shot at birth. All Right, so what you do, and what my proposal, and you'll be reading it today, because we dropped it off a couple of days ago, at his resort, Coolum Resort it's called, in
Palmer
Coolum Resort. Alright, so what you got, when they built this thing, all of them, they got a pool up top, which is supported 30 metres in feet, that's about 100 feet above 10 stories, let's look at it that way. And what happens when you've got a nuclear meltdown of the other materials that was giving off by radiation into supporting all of the building? There's a crane on top. Now the crane, his idea is to lift out and then put down into the reactor down here. You lift the rods out and put it up and you keep them. So in number 4, so this is number 4, they've lifted all the rods out and they've placed them all up top with the spent rods. Now, during the Carter administration, Jimmy Carter was a nuclear engineer. He looks like a lovely man, doesn't he? Well, he ain't. Shell Company come up with an idea how you could use up all of the rods. So the rods themselves are about 12 feet long, say 3-4 metres, and about as thick as your finger. And they're in packs. So they've got to lift them out after they've been used and put in here. However, under Jimmy Carter's administration, Shell Company come up with their engineers come up with a way where you could use up all the rods entirely, so when the things are spent after X amount of years, right, then you just take them off and bury them there. No problem, back to being a piece of inert material. However, that was stopped. So now a fuel rod, 7% is used up, and that leaves the 93% of highly radioactive material that gives off a gigantic amount of heat. You stand next to one and you'll be dead within hours. So that's how bad it is. So they lifted them all up. They put them into the top of the tower. So here's this structure. Well, let's move a bit wider. Something like that. And they lift them up with a crane and put it... Now the cranes themselves, Lauren Murray, who is a woman who is into nuclear science as well, she said that while she was watching one of the videos, that the crane, because of the material it's made from steel, it is impregnated with the radiation because it absorbs it, and it collapsed. So they can't lift nothing up because these are robot controlled. They can't do nothing more with this, so therefore that's your problem. So when you got 1, 2 and 3 went into meltdown, what happens is it goes down, and only by an act of God did it not encounter deep enough to hit the aquifer that's running underneath. So what this is happening now is this is leaning over. So how are we going to stop that? Well, you fill it up with iron ore, the whole building, right? And you put it in iron ore inside here as well. So that is entirely filled with iron ore. Now, mixed with all this out on the outside, and not so much on the inside, this is up to you engineers to work out. I'm just telling you how to do it. You put in the thermite, and you probably put in some other materials, which I have looked up on the internet, and they are materials that scientists suggest could use. But when it goes to a thermite, you ignite it, this all melts immediately. This then falls down immediately. These are still encased in water, so it's going to drop like the Twin Towers, how they brought them down with the thermite. And it comes down to something like this. It's all going to fall away. That'll go straight down. Right, so that's going to be gone. The building itself will be gone. The crane will be gone. And you'll end up with the aquifer. You've already got to divert that. That can be done with small explosives. That's not a real worry. And you'll end up with a glass type material over the whole lot that stops plutonium. And that's it. You seal it. You make a tomb, exactly what the Russians have done. But the Russians not too bright. they built it with robots and costing thousands of lives, and they built this great machine to put all these bits together, and even it was so radioactive that even the robots themselves, the wires, wouldn't conduct electricity so they can control it. And one of the things they put on the roof by dropping in with a helicopter was sweeping the roof off of the reactor, and then it itself pushed itself over the edge. So they had to send men up there to shovel them. Well, they're all dead. So, but give it to these Russians, they were brave. These people, these young men, went in there knowing. It's not as if like in Japan where they hire the homeless to do it. So what do? They have men go up there and they volunteered and they knew they were going to die. Now, thousands did. 700 helicopter pilots died. Right? So this here can be done quite easily with a long conveyor, just pumping it straight in. Right? Or because it's iron ore, you can do it with a electromagnetically, and you can fire it several hundred metres and into the area and build it up. So as I said before, they've got 1, 2, 3. Now this one here. Now number 3. Well, I'll talk about number 1 first. It was 3 times as potent a danger to the world as was Chernobyl. Number 2 was also 3 times. Number 4 was 2,000 times. It's only an act of angelic interference that this didn't go and hit the water from the aquifer. Now this thing flows down off the mountains and actually reached Tokyo as well. So when it went into meltdown, it didn't quite reach the water. If it had reached the water, you got a nuclear bomb. That's what would have happened, right? Which would have blown number 4 out. So I think, oh, they got a problem with number 4. So they blew number 4 a few weeks ago. Right, so now what we have then is that can be over each of them. It can all be done separately, and you'll end up with piles of material which is glassified, slag you use out of the refineries, mixed with the thermite and the iron ore, and what happens is it will produce the slag, and this slag becomes glass. And I'm suggesting that you also put in sand with it, and sand itself is what makes glass. So I'd say that is probably the best way of doing it. So what I'll do now, I'll just go over to this. This is the PowerPoint, and we'll quickly go through that and we'll talk it through. So for the listening audience, what we've done, we've taken a whiteboard, we've drawn up the aerial view and then a side view of this number 4 pool, which is built 100 feet, 30 metres in the air. The building is being affected by the radiation of 1, 2 and 3, and it's starting to crumple and go to the side. And they're trying to, so they say, they're trying to contain it. And all they've done basically is put a great bit of plastic around the outside of it, and that's what they're trying to do, is to contain the radiation. That's ridiculous. So why is this so? So let's look at the way that we've proposed it. I've gone to Clive Palmer, the richest man in Australia, who owns iron, ore and coal. So both of those would be, I suggest, a mixture that you put into the area of the building and build it up in a great pile over the top. So you might end up with, say, a structure of iron ore dumped on this 200 feet high and maybe 300 feet wide in a great round egg shape, and then set it up so that it will be ignited, and when it's ignited, within seconds it'll do what it did to the Twin Towers when they brought that down. The American government and the Israelis did it, of course, and you'll end up with a free fall, and the tank itself will drop so quickly because it weighs thousands and thousands and thousands of tons. It'll drop straight down, and then the water will splash out. The heat will turn the water to steam, so the water's gone, but will also contain it. So it'll spread it out, evaporate it, contain it, and you're going to have, sure, you'll have a reaction of it, and you lose some clouds of gas that are radioactive, but that is another problem. However, it's going to end it. So you're better off ending it than going any further. So what we have here then is Fukushima is a gigantic weapon to destroy the Earth. With the latest meltdown reactor 4, there is no way of stopping it. According to experts, however, the experts say, well, the experts work for the Zionists and plan to kill all life. Now, as strange as that sounds, it is what we're dealing with, because you've all been bullshitted into saying Jesus was, in fact, not a real thing. It's just a delusion. It's similar to a myth. It's similar to the myths that they've already created about Egypt and other ones. And there's about 20 different myths where there was a virgin birth and all that kind of thing. However, none of them was true. And the reason they've done that is so that Mary would not be able to be credible. But we do know, however, that the people involved at the crucifixion at the time, they were very pedantic about finding out whether Mary was a virgin, because she got stoned to death if you weren't. A lot of women got stoned to death because they said they were a virgin, trying to bring forth the Messiah. So only Mary was able to prove that she was, and that was done by the actual Sanhedrin themselves, sending out their priests to investigate and asking what was going on. So when the resurrection occurred, for example, after that, Caiaphas was in his room with his wife and father-in-law, and he left orders, I do not want to be disturbed, because he thought he may have crucified the actual Jewish Messiah. In actual fact, he wasn't a Jew. I wasn't a Jew. I was an Essene. So Fukushima, go back through this again. Fukushima is a gigantic weapon to destroy the Earth with the latest meltdown. Reactor 4, there is no way of stopping it, according to experts. However, the experts all work for the Zionists and plan to kill all life. Why? What is the reason for such a stupid move? Well, the Western world has been completely duped down fluoride, GMO foods, vaccinations, chemtrails and invented diseases that plague mankind worldwide. No gives a shit, you want to die anyhow. What is really happening? So the Zionists want to kill us and themselves. Now, it doesn't really make sense, does it? So, what are the Zionists? No? They are on death row. You think, hello? So like any psychopath in that situation would kill the executioner if they could, right? There has been a microbe known as to nuclear science that eats spent fuel from reactors. It's called extremophily. Extremophily. The Gulf oil, on the other hand, it had also oil spill Deep Horizon, owned by the Queen and BP. There is a bacteria that eats oil. It was used in Texas in an oil spill some years prior to that, and it cleaned up the whole area overnight. But they refused. So in the Gulf, they used the various chemicals that cause people to become ill and die. So it has been used in oil tankers when required. Now, AIDS wasn't invented by the US Health Department. Google 464773. 464773. Malaria is the world's biggest killer. It can be killed with calcium hypochlorite, which is bought in any pill store, and that's what we was doing in New Guinea, rather in Fiji, because the big disease over there is malaria, and also diabetes 2. Now, diabetes 2 can also be cured with calcium hypochlorite, which is from your local pill store, right? Amazing. Jim Humble, he came up with the idea first, and has been curing hundreds of thousands of people throughout Africa. And even when the Red Cross went in there, it was found that the Red Cross was started by Rothschild. And although they were proving these people were cured of it, they wouldn't release the news. So that's Jim Humble, MMS2. So, this was sent to Clive Palmer, that the greatest threat to the world is Fukushima. The company TEPCO owns 17 nuclear reactors, and they also own the hospital in Tokyo. They call the areas up there, like you've got states in America, prefecture. And 7 in Niigata, Kashiwataki, Kariwa. The stock code is 9501, Tokyo Stock Exchange, first section. Why? Well, how much do you think the stock is worth now? Clive Palmer could go in there and with a day's pay, buy all the stock and have the controlling interest, and then fire all of the people that's in charge, and he becomes However, I said to him, well, don't you do it. I'll do it. You set me up as a corporation, put the money in to buy it, you stay in the background so that you won't have to worry about anything. You won't be upsetting the Zionists. And they can't kill me, so here we go. So there's your stock code. TEPCO paid out no interim dividends in fiscal 2013 and has decided not to pay out for the fiscal 2013 year-end dividends. Considering the current severe management environment, we regret to plan no interim and year-end dividends for fiscal 2014.
I've just read from this site, this is May 24th, that a new company has been formed.
Really?
Yes, I'll read this through, this is interesting. This was from a radio interview. Josh Ishimaru interviews Professor Haraki Koide of Kyoto University. Ishimaru, TEPCO announced the launch of Hyro, that's spelled Hairo, decommissioning company, its new company to deal with decommissioning. What is your take on this? Koide says it's a dirty strategy. TEPCO, one of the leading companies in Japan, has been operating Fukushima Daiichi, saying its nuclear plants are absolutely safe. Then Fukushima Daiichi had an accident, so the right thing to do is for TEPCO to take full responsibility. He goes on, now it created a Hyro company and let that take full responsibility. At the same time, TEPCO continues its profitable operation. That's totally wrong. On the other hand, they say detaching the decommissioning section from TEPCO, the new company can focus on its mission. Also, it can make the decision process shorter and quicker. Is it effective? TEPCO should make a team within and find out a way to act swiftly. He goes on about the current progress of decommissioning, and they're talking about this decommissioning that they say is going to take at least 40 years. This thing is totally, as of May the 7th, they say they moved 814 of the 1,533 rods from the UFP. Is this reasonable? He says yes, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, they don't know where the melted fuel is. And the guy says, Coyote says, nothing has been done. I don't think the melted fuel is sitting in one piece as TEPCO and the government imagine. Probably many pieces are scattered everywhere in the reactor vessel, for example, blah, blah, blah. It's a long road to decommissioning. The government says it will take 40 years, but that is not going to be enough at all. When they're finished, I'll have been dead for a long time. So here these idiots are talking about decommissioning this thing. And no, so bottom line is they've moved a few fuel rods and nothing's happened.
Yeah, that's right. Oh dear.
So Hyro is the company responsible now?
Okay, now what I'm showing on the screen now for you people that are listening is the dividends, how they've gone. There's a red graph there that goes across, and at one point it was making money and then suddenly it dropped. That's because in 2011, and then it's been deadlining all the way through.
This is more interesting, you've got to read this. The shareholders of TEPCO's biggest stockholders are banks. And I mean, this professor is talking about why they didn't do it not as to upset their their stockholders. They didn't decommission, they didn't, take any, this is why all the information is being kept secret. So as not to upset the stockholders, who are banks, I think. Big banks are TEPCO's biggest stockholders. I think it's the Japanese government's policy to not do damage to those banks.
Well, you know why, don't you?
And also he says here, since those politicians receive a large amount of donations from those big banks and TEPCO.
But you do recall that the finance minister was threatened by the oligarchy that they were going to bring in an earthquake unless,
yes.
and I think it was Coyote, was it?
Coyote.
That he said go away, and then they said right, they send in at the hour,
yes,
because Harper's behind it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Harper's the weather machine, which is now owned by the Rothschilds. So you can see the bank again is behind it. Why? Because the banksters are the demons that control. What do they say about a rich man entering the kingdom of heaven? You can't. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Right? Mm. So they already know what I'm up to, and now they're making moves overnight to stop this, because my computer, as you know, is already bugged. So this has been in the computer for a little while of how to cure it and what was behind it, and they know as much as I do about the bank being behind all of TEPCO and the hospital. Oh dear.
No truth.
So, I was saying here, every shareholder wants out, so with a letter to Mr. Palmer, he was in a position where he could have bought it all for next to nothing. But the banks tell him what to do. Right? So he's going to do nothing. Now, the point is, he didn't help us get to Rome to help the Pope, and he's a Catholic. Because
and had already, his big thing, he had already donated about $40 million to the Catholic Church over the years, you know, as part of his philanthropic. Yeah, he wouldn't help us.
Okay, so Zionism in the Old Testament talks about the fallen angels going into the women because they were fair, right? Well, these fallen angels were the giants in those days. But then again, as I said in other videos, that everybody was giants in those days. So a giant woman, she could have been 25 feet tall too, right? Because of the gravity being far less before the flood. However, you can't get too deeply into that in a biblical term, because the politicians and bankers that control the religious groups in America that do all of the bullshitting about supporting Israel and sending donations to them is all to do with the demons themselves have also... What is a demon? A demon is an evil thought. So these people have inherited the evil from the past. So we're here for the judgment. They know the judgment is on, they know that God himself is here, and that's why I am here talking to you. I mean, I should be first on the list to be killed. Well, how many times they try to kill me? We should do a video on that.
Well, that was going to be a show. We'll do that one later. Okay,
so the law regarding Fukushima meltdown in Japan states that if any company worker talks to it in a negative way, what do they get? 10 years in jail. Now, this is what Albert Einstein said. I am a Jew, but I am enthralled by the luminous figure of the Nazarene. I'm talking to the Jews now. The luminous figure of the Nazarene was an Essene. I'm an Essene. I was an Essene then, I'm an Essene now. God's an Essene. Right? The oldest religion comes from Enoch. That's why it's not in your Bible, the book of Enoch. It gives you the orbits of the earth and the stars and everything else in a 365-year lifetime, which then he ascends and taken up to God. No death involved, right? Because he had made it. Right? So, what did Einstein say? As a child, I received instructions both the Bible and in the Talmud. The Talmud, right? What's the Bible he's referring to? The Torah. I am a Jew, but I am enthralled by the luminous figure of the Nazarene. Jesus is too colossal for the pen of phrasemongers. Now, what's a phrasemonger? The one that uses language to belittle. However artful, no man can dispose of Christianity with a bon mot. No one can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus. His personality pulses in every word. No myth is filled with such life. So all you Jews in Israel, you're in for the high jump too. They're going to kill you. Right? They don't give one damn about you. You are as good as dead now. Because all of this Fukushima thing is designed to kill the earth. And that is why Hitler has been a man that has been totally demonised. He didn't have the Holocaust, he didn't do any of those things. Sure, the SS did kill some of the Jews. Sure they did. Actually, they were Hungarians. Right? And he stopped it as soon as he found out about it. He said, they're going to blame me. Right? Well, history will blame him for you killing those people. So he rounded them up and I think he shot them. So this is a war situation. However, the Jews, countless thousands of them, come through the Holocaust after 4 years of being locked up, and they got typhus at the end of it, and so did everybody in Germany. Right? They was all starving. So how is it that you could live for 4 years in a concentration camp and at the end of it walk out? If this bullshit was true, that you were getting exterminated in showers and then into gas ovens. It cannot be done, and it's been proven many times over. The media of the world is entirely Zionist, Jewish dominated, and are not talking about what is going on in Fukushima. So Australia's not talking, Parliament we've listened to, these morons down there. I mean, how they carry on. And Fukushima is going to take out the world.
Yes.
So Palmer will become Prime Minister because it's all set up by the banks, right? You can't get 500 million a year out of China without having the banks involved. Someone's transferring the cash, right? So if it wasn't for Clive Palmer, right, the Liberal Party today in Australia would not have got in because they have preferential voting. In other words, a small party that has 10% of the vote can swing when the other party, the Liberals say, and the Labor Party, it's like the Americans parties.
They give their preferences. So
they have a preference.
They hand them over.
They say, oh, we'll give you our votes when we've got 10% of them. We'll give you to you, the Liberal Party, and that gets the Liberal Party in.
Yeah.
And the Liberal Party, under this moron who is a Jesuit Catholic, has just recognised Israel as being not an occupier in a territory of the occupied territories. They are now taking out Palestine out of the picture altogether.
And he did that quietly. He registered quietly.
He did it quietly.
After he got in.
So this is going back, I'm just saying here, the incredible volume of reduction comes from combining the plutonium waste with ground granulated blast furnace slag, a byproduct from manufacturing steel and iron. The result is a glass that stabilises the plutonium so it can be stored safely. Japan presently produces enormous quantities of slag from ore imported from Australia. For the study, however, the team used cerium instead of plutonium because it has the same properties, but one is not dangerous. The two metals act similarly, leaving cerium as a safe alternative for the researchers to use while refining the technique. 3 parts cerium and 1 part blast furnace slag were combined and heated to over 1500 degrees. This is what you can do with ferrite. And then cooled at room temperature. The result is a durable black silicate glass that can easily store harmful plutonium. You'll see if you go to Hawaii, the lava there is all the same stuff. Right? The melting process does not produce a violent reaction, and the glass product is only 5 to 20% of the volume of the starting metal materials because the process happens with very few steps. The research team hopes that it could eventually be used in the clean-up effort from the Fukushima plant that was damaged from the earthquake, which was caused by HAARP, and tsunami, which was caused by the American carrier that dropped a bomb on Ronald Reagan. And the radiation given off there, they don't give a shit about the sailors, irradiated the boat, and now they've had, in the first few months, they had 70 odd people coming down with cancer. So, as I said, some years ago, the finance minister of Japan was threatened by Zionists to hand over the nation's banking and a vast sum of money as a fine. At first he refused, then he was told there would be a quake on a certain date. This occurred at the very moment that they said, and of course he relented. Pope Benedict XVI announced myself, Leonard Golightly Marshall, this is from the letter to Clive Palmer, that he was Christ. He wrote an apostolic letter and it was uploaded to the internet on April 3rd, 2013. His office was forced and he was beaten and his staff charged with treason by Francis. Since then it has been confirmed that they were executed and Pope Benedict XVI is a prisoner of the Vatican. So they were executed by the thugs working for Francis that had kicked in the door of the papal office, opened by the man who is the second in charge, if you like, who wants to be Pope, don't you worry about that. That is George Cain Swain, Archbishop George Cain Swain. Mr. Palmer was asked for assistance to get myself, Mr. Marshall, to Rome. Then after saying, how can I help, he told his secretary Bill, a killing resort, he had changed his mind and said it was not in the religious business. Now we're on pensions, right? It cost us money to go down there and come back again. In fact, I even got a fine down there.
Yes.
Right, for parking. An old age pension, I got parked in an old age pensioner's home.
Yes.
Right? The Christian world believes the Bible is the Word of God. Well, it's bullshit. No greater mistake has ever been perpetrated upon mankind. Now, since Mr. Golightly myself was predicted in the stars, and as a study of astrology only applies to him, I will briefly lay it out for you. So I'm talking in the third person. Okay. Vatican. The first 2 pages, Pope Pius and that's Pope Pius the 11th and Pope Pius the 12th. They were good men. Then John the 23rd introduced a move into the Vatican He was a Freemason. He was followed by Paul VI. He was murdered and replaced by a double. See photo. I'll go down in a moment. Pope John Paul I was murdered after 29 days in office. Good man. He was replaced by John Paul II. He was a Jew, a Polish Jew. His mother was a Jew. He was responsible for introducing Vatican II. He was replaced by Pope Benedict XVI, an honest man who thought the Pope was a good man before him. That's John Paul II. A true believer in Jesus, as he is, he became aware Christ was back through a German lady that was able to contact him after he had resigned from the position of Pope and he had a few moments to spare. On his Facebook page, Father Giuseppe Civello had uploaded for him. He was later murdered because this was a treasonous act as far as Francis was concerned. The two popes, that's the new pope and the old pope, sat together for 45 minutes and he revealed, this is Benedict, revealed to Francis that Mr. Golightly Marshall was the Christ, and yet he was denied by Francis. He was a Jesuit Jew, and if you look at the bottom there, go to the Jesuit oath, it is unbelievable what this man, they are monsters. So Paul VI, 1897, resigned as Pope of the Catholic Church from 1963 until his death. He reigned as Pope, I should say, until 1963 to 1978. However, many devout Catholics believe the real Pope was replaced by an impostor. Now this is by John Hubbard, and this is what he's saying. In 1973, the Marion Press, Georgetown, Ontario, Canada sent the Pinkerton's Detective Agency, which is what I wanted to hire to go to Rome with the money from Clive Palmer, to investigate substitutes used to represent Paul VI. The evidence gathered at the time was positive. Now, if you look here, you can't see it, of course, on the radio, but if you go to the YouTube, you'll see it, or look it up yourself. Go into the search engines and look for imposter Pope Paul VI. You see here the nose structure, the face structure, the lips, the width of the head, the ears and so forth. And this man was also a moron, and this man was highly educated. And even the President of France, who was speaking to him, walked away laughing his head off, so the man's a moron. The impostor Pope was first photographed December 11, 1974. He had an elementary education and due to the lack of proper education was not adequately in a position to answer questions and issues with coherence. The lack of proper training was clearly evident when some European statesmen were granted private audiences from the fall of 1975. See more at, and there's the address. Now, if you go on and just search impostor Pope December 11, 1974, it'll bring this up for you at home listening to this, and you'll find where you can click on and find this particular reference. So when queries of depth and coherence were submitted his way, his responses took the shape of comments rather than answers, but unworthy without the quality of capacity habitual to his distinguished guest from such occasions. It was unanimous to these statesmen and church dignitaries that something was rotten in Rome. The impostor Pope had small green eyes, Paul VI had large and very clear blue eyes. During the spring of 1997, a colour photo of the impostor Pope was sent to Germany. It showed definite signs of plastic surgery, operations done to him. So they had set this man up who was a moron, who looked similar only. He wouldn't have passed for his brother, for example, but he was close enough when you're taking photography in those days, no internet and so forth, and of course the newspapers were all controlled, and they wouldn't run the photos either. So there it is. Last year, Pope Benedict XVI announced he had been speaking to the Messiah. Now, he's a generous, gentle man. He even asked me to forgive Francis because he wouldn't believe. So he became the Antichrist. And as a man who was a leading scholar, I'm teaching him the Bible, right? Although I'm saying, well, a lot of it is bullshit, I was an Essene, and that he is a reincarnate of the first, which was Bishop of Rome, which of course was himself coming back as Peter. That's why his name in the prophecies is Petros Romanus, Peter of Rome. So later thugs working for Francis forced their way into the office of Pope Benedict XVI. beat him, then arrested him, his staff removed, and are still missing, presumed dead. And we did get on the Pope's computer by these thugs working for Francis, who obviously are morons because they're uneducated, knowing that if you send a letter or an email on someone else's computer, you know the origin of it, you can track it, you can even find the office where it came from, and also you're recording it. And this is all the kind of information I sent to Clive Palmer, right? Who is the richest man, and because he is, he's going to be Prime Minister of Australia. Why? There'll be nothing left. Only Australia will survive this, right? So they're trying to take over, and all these swines who are coming down here, the bankers and so forth, they'll be coming to Australia. It's already, I've seen with my own eyes, the computer that was in the Commonwealth Bank, that was down in the bowels of the building, twice as the height of a building, of a normal one story, it was take 2 stories high, and standing out the front of it in front of plate glass, 2 inches thick, where the soldiers, Australian soldiers, with their Bren guns across their chest, or FN rifles across their chest, walk in there and step out of line and shoot you, right? I cannot see that happening in Australia, but they can always find some psychopath that'll do it. So, during the Carter administration, a method of Jimmy Carter, he was a nuclear scientist. Now, he was shown how the present only use of 7% of the rods that are in these reactors are used up. So they have 93% are removed as spent fuel rods. I don't know what to do with them. I say blast them into space, put them on a rocket and take them into space and get rid of them. So, no, they're not going to do that either. So, what happens is that when they go into meltdown, they hit over 10,700 degrees Fahrenheit and they melt down into the earth. So with this business, I'm saying put a canopy over the whole lot like they've done in Russia at Chernobyl, but they did it with a building they've got to replace now. But with this way, we have a glass iron structure that is solidified right over the whole lot. And then you can allow the material to go down into the molten mantle and be destroyed in the mantle of the earth. And Japan is ideal for it because it's very close to the surface, the molten mantle there. Australia, on the other hand, is the thickest depth of material in any of the continents. They give you some idea. It's one giant plate in Australia, so you couldn't do it here. But there you can do it. So we go on to the story. The reality is all nuclear reactors are intended to kill off all life. Why? Because they know with God in the flesh, myself being here, Yahweh in the flesh, the soul of Jesus, I'm here now, and they know that they are doomed. So unless time was shortened, there'll be no flesh left to save. That's one of the prophecies. Now, it will happen. When they can't beat me. Right? They've been trying to kill me for years. So therefore, because they can't kill me, they know I'm here, they know I'm going to win, so therefore they're going to kill everyone. That's what Adolf Hitler warned about. He said, unless you stop these Jews, he was talking about the Zionists, the life on earth will be all dead. And the earth will be left a floating sphere in the ether of space. So we're dealing with Pharisee priests that had no idea they were Talmudic, delusional psychopaths that are in charge of Israel today, and they have infiltrated into the church, and have been in the church ever since day one. So, as I condemned them, I also said that Moses was full of shit, it didn't happen, it's all invented by the Pharisees out of Babylon. So, this is why I was nailed to a cross. Now, the reason I was nailed to a cross is to prove resurrection and to fulfill the law, because it was prophecy of Isaiah that I would be nailed to a cross and resurrect from the dead, as it was in the Hindi prophecy of 2,500 years before that. Now, when I was born, you go to a program, Solar System Scope. It's free download when I got it. I think you've got to pay for it now, and I'm not sure whether it does the same what I'm showing you here. I'll be surprised if it does. But in the original, you can measure to each of these planets from Jupiter. Why Jupiter? Jupiter is 88,800 miles across. When I'm 8,880 days old, I'm in Port Alberni. The sunrise to sunset was 888 minutes. My daughter was born. My brother is 8.88 years older than me, and on the day I was born, on January 11th, 1944, sunrise to moonrise was 888 minutes, and it goes on and on and on and on. The distance to all of the planets in astronomical units measured from Jupiter, so Jupiter to Venus, Jupiter to Mercury, Jupiter to the Sun, Jupiter to the Earth, Jupiter to Mars, and Jupiter to Saturn, total 31.68 astronomical units, and that is Lord Jesus Christ in Greek gematria, where the Lord is 800, Jesus 888, Christ is 1480, totaling 3168. When he, that's myself, this is in the letter, was 888 days old, my daughter, Tracy Lee, was born in Port Alberni, Canada. Now I want to go on from that. When all the planets lined up in that date, in the year 2004, I think it was, or maybe it was 2000, I'm not sure. It's not really important. Even today, if you were to weigh me on all of these 7 planets, like Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury and Sun, my body weight is the same number as the area of the Shroud of Turin. Now we've only got 5 minutes to go, so we're running out of time, but that is probably something you should be looking at. Go to our YouTubes, which will be on each of the radio programs. You go to it. This is number 14, is it?
Number 14, yes. Number
14. So I'll just let that carry on, because we can leave this much longer on the YouTube as we can. We're only limited to 1 hour for the radio program. Now you'll see this is done by Pierre in Holland, Amsterdam. It shows, this is what the Pope saw on the left-hand side top is the face of the Shroud of Turin. He looked at this for 3 days and was absolutely blown away because the bone structure is exactly the same. So there it is there, face of Shroud of Turin. There it is overlaid with my face. There it is with the eyes open, with the blue eyes. This was taken by my lovely wife when we was in Rome. And that's how the actual photograph looked like that. She did it spontaneously and had a towel over my head and so forth, and we ended up looking like that.
We had the quilt.
The quilt.
As a robe around you with a dark blue towel over your head.
Okay, so that's what we end up with those there. So going from top left to bottom right, that's what you got. The old man looking at you, because the soul of Jesus was Yahweh, which is God in the flesh. That's why I'm here, and that's why they're packing the shits, because they know they can't beat me. They can kill a lot of you, right? The only one thing that's going to save you is believing me. So you better get off your fingers and stop sitting on them and get out, and one that's probably stuck in your ass as well, and start dialing and telling people, and just don't give up. Don't be, because they're going to kill everybody in Europe. They're going to kill everybody in North America. In fact, they're talking about now that there's at least 10 particles of plutonium in each person every day, hot particles, and 1 is enough to kill you, right? It takes 5 years. So everybody in North America, you're rat shit. Everybody in Europe, you're rat shit. Unless you believe in me, and that will save you.
Salvation today is knowing the new name
That's right.
of the Redeemer, Brian Leonard Golightly Marshall.
Okay, is that the end of the radio then?
Yes.
Okay, switch that off.
And we're going to need that as well.
All right.
So
We'll end this here then.
Right now.
Hasta la vista.